Welcome. I hope you guys are enjoying the rest of the R2P virtual symposium videos. I am Dr. Beau Beard, and I am a current board member with R2P. And today I'm going to be talking about authentic branding. So I know there's a lot of smart cookies talking about lower extremity injuries, biomechanics, loading, a lot of fun stuff. And I see a lot of runners in my practice. So I figured I didn't want to overlap too much. And I'll talk about something else that matters is the brick and mortar part of this thing. And how are we creating a business model and what goes into that to allow us to treat all these people with all these fancy things that we learn. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about branding. When we think about branding, I'm sure we have ideas of major brands throughout history, ones that are important to us, our ideas about how branding applies to business. But if we're going to talk about chiropractic specifically, we need to talk about both branding and business as it applies to us. And by us, I mean chiros, PTs, trainers, kind of all in the same boat. So I think a lot of the times we think, hey, you go to school, you get a knowledge base, right? I met my wife, Sloan, and you graduate, you open a business, right? Here's our ribbon cutting. And then all of a sudden you're 5 years into business. Like it just happens, right? If you have enough knowledge, if you have the skills, if you have some talent, if you're personable, you'll probably succeed. I think it's the furthest thing from the truth. There is a very high attrition rate of business failure, especially with private practice, chiros, physical therapists. And if we've learned anything during this coronavirus time, it's the fragility of the brick and mortar model, in particular as it comes to the training, the performance side of rehab to performance with coaching. It's going to be a very revealing paradigm shift with the strength and conditioning world when this whole thing shakes out. Obviously, we think there's going to be a lot more remote programming. There's going to be a lot more hybrid models, but a lot of that is going to be based on what? Retention based on brand, right? That somebody felt like they had some allegiance to something, so they're going to stick with them no matter what happens, right? Across the shift. But I'm going to back up a little bit and define some of these things before we get any further into this. So the very blasé definition of business is defined as an organization or enterprising entity engaged in commercial, industrial, or professional activities. The term business also refers to the organized efforts and activities of individuals to produce and sell goods and services for profit. I highlighted business and individuals because most chiros, PTs, trainers are going into practice on their own. Very rarely do we start in groups. Maybe, it's like a husband and wife team like me, or you partner up with a buddy or, somebody from school, but it's usually a solo venture. And then if we define brand, this is from the AMA, a brand is a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's good or service as distinct from those of other sellers. So that distinction is huge. We know all these things, right? Inherently, it's just good to get a good principled definition of all these things, because if you're going to try to apply anything, that could be rehab modalities and methodologies, adjusting, strength and conditioning principles. If you don't understand it at its bare bones level, at the fundamentals level, good luck building anything complex, scaling a business, anything like that. My definition of brand is an outward expression of your inner story that is easily discerned and disseminated by others. And I should say, my definition of brand as it applies to our types of practice, right? Conservative musculoskeletal management and training. Because I think it's very different for every business. So there should be a brand identity definition for every type of business. And if you don't go through and define all the things that we're going to define in this talk, starting with brand, it's like creating a business on a shaky foundation, right? It doesn't take much to knock that thing down. And we can also see that this building is for rent. There's probably a lot of interesting analogies we can pull out of this. But we want to build those principles, right? We want to build that foundation of what is our business, right? Do we think of a business as a building and a clinic and a place where we treat people? Or is a business far more ethereal and more abstract and more idea driven? And I truly believe it is. And that's why I think brand is greater than business. That's what I was initially going to call this talk. I just think it is so powerful, especially in the digital space. Think of nothing can exist that is in a real world, right? Brick and mortar, a footprint, someplace you can go, and you can do a lot of what we do. Yeah, there's always going to be a manual part to the manual therapy and conservative musculoskeletal management. But man, stuff is changing. So at any time during the history of our types of businesses, brand is more important than ever. I mean, how many times have we seen somebody hang a shingle off of, in my case, Beard Chiropractic, Smith Chiropractic, Johnson Physical Therapy, whatever it is? Like, those days are gone. Like, those places will tumble. They'll tumble against competition with insurance premiums rising, people expecting different types of healthcare, basically just a higher level of healthcare, having to discern where they're going to spend their money, both because of rising costs and lower incomes, especially during pandemic times like this. And the reason people make those choices is because of how you make them feel, how you associate them into your tribe. And yeah, there's all these books out there, Tribe and Made to Stick, and Simon Sinek. Why? There's a ton of good info out there, but something that I tell our interns all the time, that knowledge is useless unless it implies action, right? Unless it gets you to do something. So I hope that as we go through this talk, you learn something that just makes it easier for you to act on these things that hopefully are happening. And if they're not, we need to make sure that we go back and put them in place. I don't know if everybody is familiar with the Kleenex story, but Kleenex did such a good job branding tissue, right? Facial tissue, that now Kleenex is synonymous with tissue. So the brand now at least has an equal part notoriety within that space, or maybe even supersedes tissue, which is so interesting to think. That would be like if we called cars just Mercedes, right? Just, I'm driving a Mercedes. Well, no, you're not. That's a Ford. Well, yeah, technically. But that is a awesome branding venture. And, do I still buy generic Kleenex, right? For the office? Yeah. So it's not like just because they own that branding marketplace share that everybody buys Kleenex. Yeah, other companies exist, but that now their marketing efforts are done, right? That took a very long time, but Kleenex really doesn't have to market a whole lot anymore to get their products on shelf to have people buy it. And here we have a Lexus and a Toyota. These are the exact same chassis, right? So this is technically the exact same car, exact same engine. And what do we see? They're also made by the same manufacturer, right? Toyota and Lexus are the same company, same umbrella company. But what we see is, yeah, there may be some bells and whistles on the Lexus, but this is a brand identity thing, right? Every car company has a what we call middle class brand, and then they have an upper class brand. But what does that cost us? Well, in this case, it costs us $36K on average to just be brand loyal, or at least think that the brand itself, right, besides the bells and whistles, offers us something, whether that's outside perception, a belief that the quality is better, whatever that belief is. Lexus has capitalized to the point where $36,000 per car just in brand. So the cost to make these is almost negligible, right? When we break them down, like, yeah, there may be a little higher end leather, maybe a little higher end electronics, but like negligible. So the margin overall, or sorry, not the margin, the wholesale value is probably relatively the same. The margin is drastically different with the Lexus. As solo individual practitioners, coaches, trainers that are ever increasingly moving into a cash marketplace, especially for, the chiros and PTs, in a world with a growing body of competition, how do we not think brand is important, right? The fact that, hey, there may be everybody out there on the block. This is the problem we run into in our area, that, hey, you're a chiropractor. I go to a chiropractor down here. How do you differentiate yourself, right? Do I want to go toe to toe with the guy that's charging just a copay and writing everything off, or, it's $30 in adjustment cash? No, totally different ballgame. It's not even the same as, in my opinion, Toyota and Lexus. We want to make it completely different, right? We're not that I don't want to be a chiropractor and that you out there don't want to be a physical therapist or a trainer. The label doesn't make a difference. We need to rebrand ourselves based off of what we're going to get into, which is identity. And one of the best branding stories in history, and if you're watching right now as this is coming out, The Last Dance, it's kind of giving us a bit of nostalgia, but is the whole Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, right? So this started with action. This started with what? Slam dunk competition back in, I want to say 91. Uh, and then we saw that he had this replicated in commercials and obviously photo shoots. This turned into an iconic logo, which has now turned into a multi-billion-dollar company that exists alongside Nike, not under even Nike's umbrella anymore. So just think of that. Here is somebody that made their living millions and millions of dollars playing a sport, but then has made however, what percent X more creating a business based on identity. And yeah, I'm sure he had a fantastic group of people along the way that helped him do this. Obviously, he didn't do this on his own. We don't have that luxury. And we also probably don't have the millions of dollars to help prop this up. So we have to be very clear. We have to create clarity around what we want to do with our brands. But Michael Jordan didn't start with that dunk, right? He didn't start as Air Jordan. He started as Michael Jordan. And with any good story, there's an origin story. How many times, right? It comes up in this documentary. It comes up in anything you hear about Michael Jordan that he got cut from the 8th grade basketball team, which isn't quite so, right? He didn't make varsity as, I believe, a freshman or an 8th grader, which whoop-de-doo, right? I got cut from the 7th grade basketball team that was the 7th grade basketball team. And then what did he do? Everybody says, well, he, the 10,000 hour rule, he started working really hard. And this was a talented guy. He was one of the most highly recruited athletes, basketball players out of high school, went to North Carolina, had a work ethic like a beast, was not a highly developed athlete when he got to North Carolina per his coach, but he worked harder than everybody, wanted to know what he could do. And not that that's building a brand, but his backstory, right? His origin story is what made, he was probably the greatest basketball player in all time. But when we talk about those stories, it creates this allure. And if you ever watch any of the, 30 for 30 or E60s, these are great storytelling documentaries about athletes. In particular, if you think about the one about like Bo Jackson, this lore of what he did as a child, right? Killing a pig with a rock because he could throw so hard, being the strongest, fastest kid in his neighborhood, beating high schoolers when he was in grade school. Like these things build this mythology around humans and what do we want to do? It's no different than Roman and Greek times where we tried to make the gods into an anthropomorphized version of something that made sense to us, right? So if it was thunder or lightning, they had to create a god for that. Or if it was Vikings, they had to create Thor. Well, what we want to do as chiropractors and PTs is, I don't think we want to, designate ourselves as a true superhero. I'm not going to go around saying I'm Wolverine. What we need to do is recognize that brand is just as powerful for us as it is for Michael Jordan or for anybody out there. But what I see is that we fall into these generic camps of, especially right now, what are some common concepts and things that occur? Everything's based around mobility, movement, rehab to performance, right? We're in one of those cliches even. Everything's getting mixed up in here and everybody just wants to say, one of our new doctors and interns, I kind of said, what do you want to get involved in? He goes, mobility. Well, that's great, but so does everybody else. And if the lay public has now become very comfortable with that term, how are they going to differentiate you within that whole mobility movement schema? You want to be a movement guy or gal. Like whoop-de-doo, you got to dig deeper, right? Everybody's doing that now. The whole thing has been turned on its head. Not quite completely. We're about 75 degrees of the 90 we need to get there. But it's not chiropractor, physical therapy, trainer, coach anymore. It's what are you doing as those things? So as we go through life, I think with a lot of aspects, but in particular, if you're going to ever start a business or be part of a business, when we start our life, we diverge, right? We're exploring. I mean, from the time we're born, it's developing movements, exploring our environment, learning language, colors, numbers, how to read, all these things, right? We diverge. But then what do we have to do throughout life? We have to eventually converge. We have to decide, what do I want to do for athletics? What do I want to do in college? Where do I want to go to college, right? So you're taking all these divergent thoughts and then converging them. And we see this repeat throughout time. This is how you get to what I would call an authentic brand. is being very aware of all these divergent, convergent streams throughout your life, and then kind of using that through a couple exercises and practices, which we're going to go over, to say, oh, that's my brand. It shouldn't be, I developed this brand because it was an idea. Like, your brand already exists, right? It's like mining. You need to go dig for that thing. It's already there. So just like we had Wolverine, what's your superpower, right? We mentioned Simon Sinek's why. It's a bit of your why, but your superpower is more of your backstory, right? It's what got you into this field, right? What fires you up about the field? What is your thing? And you have to dig. You can't just say, I want to get people to move better. Well, that's not personal, right? I'm going to use myself as an example as I go through these. So my backstory, my superpower, I broke my femur when I was 9. I have a titanium rod in there. I had absolutely no rehab, right? I guess they figured that a 9, 10-year-old kid would just be okay. Well, I wasn't. I developed, as everybody would guess, a bunch of compensations, everything that correlates with not having rehab with major trauma and then significant surgery. To the point where I ended up meeting a chiropractor in high school who was an ex-Olympian in judo, kind of started saying, hey, you don't do some of these things so well besides the injury that you came to see me for. Let's start working on those. So my superpower came from, I was an extremely athletic kid that had it robbed, right? My orthopedist told me that I would never run again. And that's where I got this little chip on my shoulder. And then I saw, later in life, well, I didn't even get rehab. No wonder it didn't happen. Well, I met this person that became my mentor. Well, here I start to formulate my superpower of, I want to make sure that that never happens to anybody again, that everybody has an opportunity for not just adequate, but superior rehabilitation, so they don't fall into this pattern of, hey, maybe I wanted to go play a college sport, or maybe I had a shot at being a pro athlete, but you know what? I didn't get the rehab that I deserved. That's an internal fire that will light the rest of the path. That's what you have to find out is, if you chose being a physical therapist because you thought it was a good career move, I'm not going to knock you, but you're going to have to dig for something more if you go to brand yourself and create a business, especially if you want to be successful and you want to fire up other people around you. And then what makes you unique? This is that differentiator. So this is how we say this is different from your superpower, is just because I want to make sure people have that experience, that superior rehab, that ability to get back to what we call better than before in our clinic, doesn't really make me unique. There's a lot of people out there. What makes me unique is who I am. I'm a country guy. I was raised in a town of less than 10,000 people. I lived in the country. I played outside constantly. So what I started to realize is, well, you know what? I need to capitalize on the fact that, hey, we moved to Birmingham, Alabama. I was raised on a farm. I was treating farm league athletes, baseball, like AAA farm league. And all these things started to percolate, right? And I started to say, well, that kind of makes sense. How could I play on that? And then how do you define success, right? And all of these we've heard before. So if we back up here, differentiator, like how are you going to make yourself different? And then we look at this, like vision. Everybody talks about your vision story, your story brand, all these things. Just what does success look like to you? I hope it's not just a monetary thing. I hope it's not just, I want to see this many people. I want to retire by this time. Like, literally, what do you see occurring maybe it's 3 to 5 years from now in your clinic, but more so in your life? Like, what do you want your life to look like? Because your business is supposed to be a catalyst for your life. We don't want to be a slave to our business. And if we don't want to be a slave to our business, we need to be very clear on what that business does. That business is supposed to create fuel for your life. It is not your life. I promise you that. And if it is, I think you're always going to run into problems. So how do you define success? You need to sit down with your family, your business partners, and everybody has their own vision. So you don't have to come together and compromise. You just need to be aware of everybody's vision of success. That's a bit what guides you on this path, right? So now we're figuring out, hey, I got this kind of talent, this superpower, this thing. Oh, this kind of makes me different. I'm starting to put these pieces together. This is the path I want to pave. And then what I would say is, you've got all these pieces, right? You got these things, these ideas. How do you allow others in on that secret, right? Some people aren't comfortable enough with themselves or don't know themselves well enough. They don't have great self-awareness to even allow others into that circle, right? So somebody may come into their clinic and they always have a guard up, right? It's a facade. We're going to talk about that in a second here. But this is strategy. This is brand strategy, right? This gets talked about all the time. Brand strategy is just how do you let people know this stuff, right? There's a million ways. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Welcome to your brand. Like I said, far too often, I fell into this trap. My Try9 clinician had us do a lot of the business exercise, which were great. But one of them was, hey, create a logo, create a company name, create a brand that you could use right when you get out of school. Well, I hadn't gone through this process, right? Honestly, I didn't go through this process completely consciously, right? This just happened. And then as you look back, you're like, man, I'm glad I did it this way. But I just kind of came up with a clinic called Victory Chiropractic and Performance Center. Yeah, it's cool. It was a cool logo, all that stuff. But what did that mean? That didn't mean anything. You can make it mean something, but that wasn't personal to me. That doesn't let anybody in on the secret of who I am or who my wife and I are. As soon as you say something like our brand, the farm, and then you break, functional athletic rehabilitation movement, like people get it. Well, why? And then it adds to it. What? Like, well, why is it called the farm? So we instantly get to share our story. Now, there are tons of clinics that are extremely successful with pretty, what I would say, generic names, like, something spine and sport, ortho sport, all these things. That's great. But I'm just saying that I think your marketing efforts have to be greater with a more generic brand than if you have an authentic brand that creates, what some people would call like that, the 1,000 raving fans, right? Those people that are going to do anything for you because they get who you are. It's just like, your group of friends. Most people, I think the stat is when they get over the age of 40 to 45, they have, I think now it's like 5 close friends. But that's enough, right? If you have 5 close friends rather than like 30 acquaintances, that's much better, especially that's what data shows. Well, maybe in our practices, maybe it's not 1,000 raving fans. Maybe we need 100. I believe the only way you do that is through authentic branding. Now, let's clarify something or shine some light on it. When we talk about mission and purpose in a business, right? If you're formulating a business plan, a lot of times we'll say, hey, what's your mission statement? What's your vision? And then what's the purpose of this business? Realize that your mission, right, which is kind of coming out of this brand, right? My mission comes out in that superpower a bit, like, hey, I want to make sure people have a superior rehabilitation experience so they can do whatever they want to do, that they're better than they were before they walked in my clinic. But that shines light on your purpose. Can you see that? My purpose is to make sure that happens for people, but it is my mission to make sure that I create a brand that allows people to come into my clinic. So the mission and the purpose get very, I would say convoluted and like traded out. They're not. Your mission leads you to your purpose, not the other way around. I think a lot of people are, getting coached out there, like follow your passion, find your purpose. That's fine. But if you don't have a roadmap to your purpose, it can just stand there out on a pedestal and nobody can get to it. Your mission is going to guide people. If your purpose is strong, you'll get some people. But if now you have a mission I have to get people there. Think about this. I hate to bring this up, but in a religion sense, like a mission, think of old, think of the Alamo and the missions that surrounded the Alamo. These were set up. So what? They would go set a mission up in territory where they were trying to convert people. What are you trying to do? You're trying to get people into your office. We're not saying that, maybe some chiropractors have a bit of a cult. But we want to convert people that are out there in the public that may not be getting a great rehabilitation and coaching experience into our clinic so they can. That is the mission. And your brand equals your purpose. I hope that's making sense. Like these are the things that are synonymous, not mission and purpose. Your brand is your purpose. That's what you want people to realize, that, man, I go to whatever your guys' clinic are. When I go to the farm, I know they're not just going to address my pain or, just create a quick fix. It is going to be, man, they want to make sure that as cheesy as it sounds, that I am better than them before. Like I'm coming in there. And sometimes that frustrates people. They want a quick fix. And it's like, but that's not the best thing for you. Like we want to get you out of pain. We want to make you feel better. But hey, my job becomes making sure that I'm actually creating change or allowing an environment or a scenario to create change. And that's our purpose. You need to be exploring these things constantly. And once you find out that brand and that purpose, it follows you around like a shadow, right? You can't get rid of it. That's why you want to be so clear up front, because just like any major corporation would tell you, going through a rebranding process is expensive. You're going to lose people. It becomes unclear, right? Because you have differentiating or differing, missions and visions as you go through this stuff. And yeah, you need to revamp stuff. But if you're really clear up front, you don't have to completely change. And I just think, especially nowadays with social media and how easy it is and how less expensive it is to advertise and market, like clarity drives marketing now. And like I said, this is my authentic brand. Like, I grew up on a farm. Are we all going to be able to take something from our childhood and brand it in? No, that doesn't work for everybody, but there is something that got you where you are. And that's what you need to capitalize in some way, right? In some way. But that's why we came up with this stuff. And then this is probably the biggest thing that I can tell everybody that's listening. How you live is how you advertise. That wasn't the case even probably a decade ago. A decade ago in private practice, you had a significant amount of your budget applied to advertising, right? The old kind of baseline percentage was 15% of your annual budget was put towards advertising. That is not the case anymore. I'm telling you, it is not, especially in private practice when you're trying to rub two pennies together just starting out. How you live is how you advertise. So everything you do, it's not that everything you do, you go wear your brand and your logo and everything, but what you do should speak to how you created that brand in our types of business. I'm not saying this for commercial services, for a realtor, for, selling a pair of shoes. But when you have an individually based business where you're getting clients in that you're somewhat treating like friends and family, to create long-term relationships, to work on something that is super important to them and everybody else around them, AKA their health, you want them to know who you are. So before they walk into your door, they pretty much know exactly what's going to go down. What you don't want is somebody showing up to your clinic that is not looking for an active-based model, that doesn't want to deal with somebody that's, maybe you're the guy or gal that's notorious for pushing people, right? That getting them better. But for some people, they don't want that at all. Or maybe you're known for, whatever it is, a certain specialty. You're probably going to be heavily involved in that. So I'll tell you a little side story real quick. When we were about 2 years into practice, maybe a little less than 2 years, we started to see numbers dive down a little bit. And what's funny is we were super busy right before this. Well, this is a common story in a lot of businesses. We got so busy that we stopped doing what? We weren't able to go to the gym as much. We weren't able to go out to events like this on the weekend as much. We got so busy seeing people that we stopped going out and being around people, working out at the gym, just being involved. And I'm telling you right now, we've only paid for, and this isn't a brag, this is hopefully gives you some kind of basis to say, oh, I can do this. Like, I have the ability to do this. We've only paid for 2 sponsorships in 6 years, right? If you go to races, it's notorious. They charge $500, $1,000, $2,000. We've only paid for 2 races. One of them was this race that is pictured here, and one of them was a most recent race with one of our friends. You can do this on a shoestring budget, right? Whatever you're doing, I don't care if it's working events, social media is virtually free. If you want to do a podcast, get a microphone, virtually free. Like, there are so many avenues, but create it where it's not work, that you're doing the things you would already be doing, right? Going to work out, going to run on the trails, going surfing, whatever it is. But then people are aware when you're doing those things that there's some sort of brand attached to you, right? Like, hey, I saw so-and-so out on the beach, and it just reminded me that I had that ankle thing going on. Man, I need to go into their office. The only way they're going to know that is if in all of your other stuff you're talking about, you enjoy surfing, right? You treat surfers, whatever it is. Like, live your brand, and you will save yourself so much grief on advertising, which I think is obviously traditional advertising is dying. So everything we've done through the years, right, has just been surrounded by, like, it seems random sometimes, but nothing is random. There's always a rhyme and reason to creating brand, that everything you do, you incorporate a little bit of it. And pretty soon you're like, oh, it's just, no matter what we do, we're known as the farm, right? It becomes synonymous, Beau and Sloan, the farm. Hopefully, as we get more clinicians, we can create that synonymous ability for them. And also maybe help them develop their own brands if they decide to exit our clinic and start their own business. But again, I'm going to remind you, my definition of brand, an outward expression of your inner story that is easily discerned and disseminated by others. I just think it is so important to be clear about who you are, create clarity amongst your clientele and patient base, perpetuate that in your efforts, in your community, online, whatever it is. And I think you could do that, to be honest, with under $1,000 a year, regardless of what business you're in, and make multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars off of small investments of money and maybe small investments of time, because the time seems negligible because it's no opportunity cost. You're already doing these things anyways. And I hate to use a poor pun from chiropractic, but it's really living in alignment, right? That you don't spend energy on things that don't have what we would say in business a high ROI, right? Return on investment. So if you have to work outside of this aligning energy of, man, I don't really want to do that. This feels like work. Okay, I have to go work this thing. Man, I got to go to the gym today because that's where I talk to people. It shouldn't feel like that. So let's review. This is what we need to go through on this exercise. So what is your origin story? What is your why? How does that make you unique in your profession? So what's your differentiator? What are your core values? So these are your principles, right? What are the props? What are the foundation? Like, these are the things we need to be very aware of, because anytime something crosses your plate that conflicts with your core values, you already know that's a non-negotiable. You know, I can't put energy into that. How do you define success? What is your vision, right? What's that path to get me where I want to go? How do you allow others in on the secret? So that's strategy, right? This is your scheme. Like, how am I going to get me to the world? And then what are the behaviors that turn your brand into a business? These are tactics. So tactics are, again, I think sometimes we don't know the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy is a plan. Tactics are the things that we do to take that plan into action. So tactics are social media, blogging, podcasting, working events, how you talk to your patients in the office, how your staff talks to patients, you know, how your logo looks, how you look, how you present yourself. All of these things are tactics. Now, do you have to be so measured in all these? No, I don't want robots of people walking around where everything is a sale. If everything seems like it's attached to business and a sale and it's not authentic, that's why this is called authentic branding, not branding 101. People will immediately realize that you're trying to be transactional. And that is the last thing you want with anybody, that something feels transactional. Here's a very quick tip. One of the hardest things for new clinicians to do when they get out of school, or PTs or even trainers, is the sell, right? Like, you have to tell people what you think's going on, how much care they need, and you know, why. When I first started, I completely, one of my mentors is one of the speakers today, Brett Winchester, and he told me early on that he severely undertreated people because he thought that's what was best for them, because the previous model of chiropractic, in my experience, was high volume care, right? That they would come in, who knows, 30, 40 times. So what do? I started out and said, I want to get people out of the clinic in 4 to 6 visits. You can do some good with that, but are you really doing these people a service, or are you doing yourself a disservice by saying, you know what, get out of my clinic because I don't want you to have the perception of me as one of those bad guys? No, like, you're running a business. Realize that. There are things that need to take place for that, right? Certain amounts of volume, certain amounts of retention, but also, if you think within your community, you're the source of, you know, a really good healthcare source, not just movement, not just whatever it is, like, hey, come to me with what your issues are. Why wouldn't we want to be in constant contact with these people? Like, think of yourself as a fantastic resource that people don't want to lose, rather than your superpower is, I can get you better as fast as we can and get you back out. That is not a superpower. That's a terrible business strategy and also a disservice to people. And if you're not living in alignment after you went through the system, I promise you one thing. We've heard about imposter syndrome. Like, you don't feel like you may be a successful chiropractor, but you don't feel like you are. You feel like anytime you step into a room with other people of that level, that you just shouldn't be there. Well, I think we have what's called imposter fatigue syndrome going on all the time. And one of the biggest perpetuators of this is social media. People want to be perceived a certain way, right? Whether that's, I hate to say this, more intelligent than they are, so that maybe they talk a certain way. Maybe it's they only show, you know, the positives. They only show certain things. Whatever it is, like, be who you are. Wins, losses, whatever it is, positive, negative. real life and business. This is one of the things that gets debated all the time. And I used to debate this all the time with myself of, if you're going to do social media for your business or, digital marketing, that it should just be business driven. I don't think so. I want people to know who I am, and I want people to come into my clinic thinking that, it's going beyond, not in a bad way, but the marketplace is changing beyond just the typical old standard clinician patient relationship. Like we call it a therapeutic partnership. Well, part of the therapeutic model now is that psycho and social. So if we get this transactional model built with this buffer of like, hey, I'm the clinician, you're the patient, the walls are being broken down on that, mainly because of this digital platform where so much information is available that the information stands between the clinician, the coach, and the patient now, or the client, that the information is the great kind of equalizer, right? That we can't stand on this pedestal and say, well, that's not true, because guess what? They can go make sure that they're going to fact check you. And if you know in the back of your mind all the time that you're going to be fact checked, guess what? Just live in alignment. Talk about the stuff you know. Don't try to go off on tangents on things you don't know. Don't be somebody you're not, and you'll never run into problems, right? So let's clear up another big misconception. I think this is a huge misconception. Your brand is the vehicle for your business, right? Brand greater than business. This is the thing, especially nowadays with our types of businesses in particular, that drives the business. Marketing does not. Marketing is the fuel for your brand. I think we have that backwards sometimes, that we think you need to market to get patients in. You need to market to get clients in. You need to advertise to get clients in. No, you don't. You need to create clarity with your brand, live in line with that brand, a tiny bit of marketing, right? But that marketing is fueling the brand. It's making the brand more widely known. Maybe the marketing creates more clarity, right? That what you put out just allows people to define you better within their own mind to others, right? When they're referring or telling people about you or sharing things online. So realize, I think those get completely messed up sometimes, that we think, oh, I could just, Smith Chiropractic and I'll just do a ton of marketing. You could. You better have a big bankroll. But what comes before these, this is an oil refinery. So before we get that gasoline, right, in our car and start damaging the environment, you have to refine your brand. And you have to constantly be refining your brand. We talked about how it is expensive to go through a rebranding process, but I always love the sentiment of it's easier to keep up. Wow, I should keep up. It's easier to keep up rather than catch up. I think it's the same thing when we talk about brand refinement, that you're always going through these little tweaks, these little nuances, and it never seems like you're going through a rebrand, right? It's just evolving as you evolve. You are not the same person you were when you first opened your practice. I guarantee it. That being said, let's make sure that we're evolving our brand along with that, right? And if you go through a huge paradigm changing or shifting experience, let's say you want to move from a very active-based movement model to completely functional medicine because you had some major, ailment cured or whatever. Well, that's it. Maybe just say, that can't be under even the same brand. That's a totally different business, right? Like we said, different brand for every business. So just constantly be tweaking these things. How are you evolving? This thing's evolving with you. It is you for our types of business. And we talked about this earlier. This is coming out of this divergent convergent, right? You're going through this process. And I think through our life, we think we are gathering more resources, right? Overall, ideas, movement, whatever it is. But I really think through our life, you're converging. So it's this simultaneous convergence and divergence. And what I mean by that is we're converging to the more singular version of yourself, right? That you realize who you are better as you go throughout life. And that makes life so much easier because you know what to say yes to, what to say no to, where to put your energy. But that's exactly what's happening with a business. You become more convergent, which actually creates a bigger net. That seems like it would be counterintuitive, that the more singularly focused you become, the more laser precise you are with what your brand means to you and others, the bigger net you cast. But it happens all the time. Look at somebody like Eric Cressy. Here's a trainer that just worked on baseball and now is building his own baseball field. Like, he got so specific and became a knowledge expert within that field that I mean, it just blew up. And yeah, what did he also do? He lived in alignment with what he was interested in, what he was experienced in, used some of his talents, his history. And here we have somebody that's doing awesome. But this is where we can also get into sub branding. So we go through maybe a divergence of our business where we say, you know what, like I brought up the example of moving from maybe an active model to a functional medicine model. Well, what if we realize that, hey, we have this brand and there may be other brands that can live underneath it, but they shouldn't be, the farm shouldn't be doing XYZ. We've done this so many times, it's not even funny. So if you've listened to any of our podcasting efforts, you'll know, or if you're a Bears fan like I am, we had Ditka, so we had the coach, we had the Bears, Chris Farley, and then you had the Beards, right? So I think the Beards, as silly as it is a sub brand under the farm, right? Even though that's us, that's a thing that we can use to go out and, do a podcast, do something funny. Maybe we talk about, our family or whatever. Like creating these little ideas allows people to become, it's almost like they have categories of understanding of you and your business. So we have multiple sub brands that have come out. My wife's Gymnast Fix company. I had Aether, which is a breathing company. Anthro Health was my podcast. Fox Running is my running coach company. So we've had all these things come out. None of these would have worked as well, in my opinion, if they would have been just the farm, right? The farm is now doing a podcast. Hey, the farm is now doing run coaching. Hey, the farm is now working specifically with gymnasts. It just doesn't make sense. It's not even really the same company. And some of these were standalone companies like Gymnast Fix. But that's where you need to be, again, clear. So if something else comes up, right, you're trying to open up your revenue streams, which all of these are what? Separate revenue streams. And you want to open up separate revenue streams, even if that's maybe virtual consults, right? So let's take this pandemic example. Maybe you're realizing, man, I can do 50% of the income I was doing before all online. That, in my opinion, should be a completely different business, branded different. It's a different strategy and tactic to create that, that business model. So just create a sub brand, right? Maybe it's just a play on your current brand. But I highly encourage you to not stuff too much under one umbrella, because then you can't protect it all and you're going to see brands die off. So here we are back at the refinery. And when we're talking about the marketing, if we go back to that car analogy, the marketing, the fuel that's going into the brand, well, there's, we're at the refinery making the fuel. But when we're at the refinery, what are we refining? We're really refining ideas and content, right? Or content. And this is probably, in my opinion, the hardest thing for people nowadays and I've run into some of these issues. People say, well, everything's already done, right? Every injury, every movement, every exercise has already been talked about. The common rebuttal for that is, well, you need to be the expert in your area, right? In your community. I kind of agree with that. But always apply the ideas to your brand. You could say, man, I want to talk about ankle injuries. Okay, well, I want to talk about ankle injuries specific to my brand of who do I work with, right? What's the biggest, body of clientele that I have? Is it runners? Is it gymnasts? Is it CrossFit athletes? Well, then I want to talk about ankle injuries in runners that are specifically trail runners, because that's what I'm most interested in. And that jives with my brand of a bit of that, farmy outdoors company. Like the more clear you are, again, not a huge net, but that net is laser focused. It's just like Facebook advertising. You don't want to go out and do a demographic of 22 or 25 to 55 over your whole zip code. You'll pay $200-300, dollars, and maybe each lead costs you $5 or $6. You want to cast a small net. Each lead costs you like 2 cents, but each one of those leads has probably the higher probability of conversion. That's what we're trying to do with ideas, a higher conversion rate. It's not just about putting stuff out online, right? We're trying to conserve energy here. So if you're putting something out, it should be in the effort of, is this creating value for somebody? And does that value come back to me somehow, right? And it doesn't always have to. Maybe you're just completely altruistic and philanthropic with your idea and content creation. I applaud you. But I also guarantee you that you're wanting to run a business. So make sure that it's always guided towards, well, how is that going to, get people back to me to ask a question, into the clinic, whatever it is. And everything that we do has some sort of strategy and tactic behind it, right? From how we design the website and, our logos and what it looks like and what we're saying on the website and what we're saying to people in the clinic. Like I said before, like nothing goes unplanned. And I don't think there's, a lot of people would not put a website up just whimsically and say, yeah, just have some stuff in there. But how many people do you know, I'm going to use the chiropractic realm because that's where I come from, that allow companies that do these generic chiropractic websites where it's just the same thing? Hey, we treat all these ailments. If you're in a car accident, like it's literally the same website. It just has somebody else's picture. People see right through that, right? There is so much stuff online. What if somebody Googled 3 chiropractors, they want to look at all 3 of their websites and 2 of them are the same? Do you not think they're going to be like, ooh, that's a little weird? They want to see who you are before they come see you. It's no different than, think of social media and online digital marketing. Your brand is like creating your ability to go right up to their front door with whoever's referring them to you, right? So a social media referral doesn't have that person saying, man, they were awesome. There's no trust built in. So you're trying to build trust up front. That is very hard to do. So let people in on the secret of who you are, and that gets a little bit easier. So again, strategy and marketing. How are we going to get the secret out? We have done anything and everything in a budget savvy manner. YouTube, podcasting, writing, whether that's magazines, local newspapers, online blogging, speaking engagements, everything, right? You have to always be creating refined ideas and content that are fuel for the brand. Some things won't work. You also need to capitalize on some of your talents or at least your levels of comfort with some of those things, right? Are you better on video? Are you better, in front of a microphone just talking? Are you better writing? Are you better in front of people? Like there's something you can do. And even if you're not a clinician or a clinic owner, say you're an associate or a contractor, be a sub brand. This is what we would like our clinicians to do. Be a sub brand under that umbrella. So like if we have a clinician at the farm, they're a contractor, they can create their whole entire company. They could be a completely different company, but they're under the farm. So they already have a little bit of brand recognition. It's like, oh, there's this person that works at the farm that does this. Awesome, right? Now they're creating their own business. They may be able to exit one day too. I think that's what I would really like to see for the future of chiropractic PT and coaching from a business standpoint, is that we move away from this, associate employee model to everybody should be contractors. Because what if you want to buy the business from me one day? Well, you want to learn how to do all those things on your own, and maybe you completely flip the business to fit you once you own it, rather than stepping into the shoes of the business that I built that was built on my brand. That works, but I don't think it works as well anymore. Like we need to be liquid and light on our feet and able to pivot in this business world in particular now. And as we start to summarize things, I want to get a little bit bigger picture on everyone. So your life and your brand are somewhat synonymous. They live in the same circle, right? We shouldn't really be able to discern them too much for our businesses. I want everybody to be very clear on that. We're talking chiropractic, physical therapy, coaching, training from a more individual, small clinic gym model, because that's what people are looking for. You get outside of that model, it doesn't work as well. But realize that your business is inside of this thing. Too many people have this flipped where the business has eaten their life whole, that they are a slave to the thing that they built that was supposed to give them freedom, right? Finances to be able to do whatever they want. That's why we start a business, most part, unless you're starting some sort of charity. But you see people flip it where the business is the all encompassing, right? And the life that you wanted because of that business can never occur. So I highly encourage you, even if at first or even in the long run, it's not the biggest monetary move for you, become clear of what you want your life to be. That's really what we've explored through this whole thing, right? Of who are you? What's your superpower? What makes you unique? What are your core principles? These are all you. Like you could apply those to any business model now. And you could create 40 different businesses, tweaking them all based off of your personal brand. But don't let the business supersede that. As soon as you do that, you're going to flip and you're going to run into that imposter fatigue syndrome. I promise you. And I'm going to leave you with a little quote and then a little bit of an idea. So Eckhart Tolle said, the only truth of who you are, if realized, will set you free. I think that's the exercise we're looking for here. And that's what I've always attributed to one of our common themes when I'm doing my marketing efforts, my fuel for the brand of, podcasting, videos, whatever it is saying I want to create a better filter for the people out there, right? I want to give them not a, it's always a version of our truth, but hopefully I'm trying to remove biases and I'm trying to say, hey, this is the information that's out there. I want to be a source for that. Same thing with this presentation today. I hope that this presentation, allowed you to learn something that made you better than before, our cheesy little line, allows you to dig into you and your business to allow you to set yourself free. So if you feel trapped in your business, you feel trapped if you don't know what to do, you don't know what direction to head, but also if your business has you trapped, that you may have to go through a major rebranding, right? Or you completely change the business to make it fall in alignment with you. And then I think all of a sudden you're going to see that everything gets easier, that the pieces fall into place, right? That we see this synchronicity and all these coincidences occur. Like those aren't coincidences. Those are coincidences occur because we've put in the time and then the time comes to fruition, right? We just sometimes don't realize that all the investment is coming to pay at that exact time when that coincidence or that synchronized moment shows up. So I really hope that everybody that watched today learned something that they can immediately go and use. If you have any questions, please get a hold of me. I'm online at Dr. Beau Beard, email drbeaubeard@gmail.com. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the symposium and we will see you next year.